Step 2. Full script title. He traded his entire fleet for Massey Fergusons, then the local mechanic quit. There are decisions you make with a spreadsheet, and then there are decisions you make in a community where your grandfather's name is still on the co-op wall. In the spring of 2017, a farmer in North Dakota named Travis Holmgren stood in front of 4 John Deere tractors he'd been running for 8 years and made a choice that would cost him more than money. He was going to sell all of it, every piece of green iron, and replace it with Massey Ferguson. Not because he hated Deere, not because something broke, not because a salesman got in his head, because the numbers said so. Travis ran 2,700 acres of spring wheat, canola, and soybeans west of Fargo. It wasn't a massive operation, but it was efficient, clean, paid for. His father had handed him 1,400 acres debt-free in 2001. Travis doubled it by 2010. He didn't do it with risk, he did it with discipline. 4 tractors handled the work, a 7230R for spraying, an 8295R for primary tillage, an 8320R for heavier pulls, and a 7200R as the utility machine. All John Deere. All purchased used, all maintained like religion, and maintaining them was a man named Carl Dvorak. Carl had been the Holmgren family mechanic for 18 years. He started working for Travis's father in 1999, back when the farm was still running 4440s and 4640s. Carl wasn't a certified Deere tech, he'd never worked at a dealership, but he didn't need to. He'd grown up on John Deere equipment. His father ran green. His uncle ran green. Carl could hear a fuel pump failing from across the shop. He was 54 years old in 2017. He'd never turned a wrench on anything that wasn't painted green. That was about to be a problem. Travis first started looking at Massey Ferguson in February 2017, not because he wanted to, because a dealer 40 miles south in Castleton called him. Massey Ferguson was running an aggressive fleet program. The brand was trying to crack the Northern Plains, a region that had been John Deere and Case IH territory since the 1980s. Their strategy was simple: find mid-sized operators running older iron, offer them a full fleet replacement at a price Deere couldn't match, and prove the machines could survive North Dakota winters. The Castleton dealer, a guy named Ron Pritchard, had done his homework. He knew Travis was running 8 Series Deeres that were approaching 4,000 hours. He knew the 7230R had a transmission issue the previous fall. He knew Travis paid cash and didn't over-leverage. Ron called him on a Tuesday morning in late February. "I've got a program I want to show you. You don't have to do anything. Just look at the numbers." Travis almost said no. But Ron mentioned horsepower per dollar, and Travis was the kind of farmer who'd sit through anything if there was math involved. They met at the Castleton dealership on a Saturday. Ron didn't start with the machines. He started with a sheet of paper. 4 Massey Ferguson tractors, comparable horsepower to Travis's current Deeres, fleet pricing, pre-negotiated trade-in values. The total package, $673,000. Travis's current equipment, if he sold it private sale, was worth approximately $440,000. That meant $233,000 in new financing. Ron slid a second page across the desk. "Here's what it would cost to replace your Deeres with equivalent new Deere iron." Travis looked at the number, $891,000, a $218,000 difference. Travis didn't react. He just asked the next question. "What about parts availability?" Ron had an answer ready. "We stock $120,000 in Massey parts right here. Anything we don't have, we can get overnight from Fargo or shipped in 48 hours from regional. You're not in the middle of nowhere. You're 40 miles from a dealership that wants your business." Travis asked about hydraulics, about DEF systems, about whether the 8700 series could handle a 14-shank ripper in heavy clay. Ron answered everything. Then he said the thing that stuck. "Deere builds a great machine. So does Massey Ferguson. The question is whether you want to pay $218,000 to stay green." Travis drove home and didn't tell anyone. He spent the next 2 weeks running numbers. Fuel economy, service intervals, resale value projections. He called 3 farmers in South Dakota who'd switched to Massey Ferguson in the past 5 years. 2 of them loved it. One said the dealer support was inconsistent, but the machines were solid. Travis wasn't impulsive. He didn't make decisions in the moment. But by mid-March, he'd convinced himself that the Massey Ferguson deal made sense. There was just one problem: Carl. Travis had to tell him. On a Thursday afternoon in late March, Travis walked into the shop where Carl was rebuilding a starter on the 7200R. "Got a minute?" Carl didn't look up. "Yep." Travis leaned against the workbench. "I'm thinking about making a change." "What kind of change?" "Equipment. The whole fleet." Carl stopped. He set the starter down and looked at Travis. "You selling out?" "No, selling the Deers." Carl's face didn't move. "What are you replacing them with?" "Massey Ferguson." Silence. Carl picked up a rag and wiped his hands. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then, "Why?" Travis explained the fleet deal, the pricing, the horsepower per dollar advantage, the parts support at Castleton. He laid it out the same way Ron had: clean, logical, financially justified. Carl listened. Then he shook his head. "I don't work on red tractors." "Carl, it's not that different. Same systems, same diagnostics. Massey will send you to training. I'll pay for it. You'll get manuals, access to their tech line, whatever you need." Carl put the rag down. "I've been turning wrenches on green iron for 30 years. I worked on your dad's 4440. I rebuilt the transmission on that 8295R twice. I know these machines. I don't know Massey Ferguson, and I'm 54 years old. I'm not starting over." Travis tried to soften it. "You're not starting over. You're just learning a different color." Carl looked at him. "It's not about color. It's about what I know, and I don't know Massey Ferguson." Travis could feel it slipping. "So you're saying if I buy these tractors, you're done?" Carl didn't hesitate. "I'm saying I turn wrenches on John Deere. That's what I do. If you don't run Deere, you don't need me." Travis stood there for a moment, then he nodded. "All right. I'll give you 2 months' notice. That's fair." Carl didn't argue. He just went back to the starter. Travis walked out of the shop knowing he'd just lost the best mechanic he'd ever had. He bought the Massey Fergusons anyway. The deal closed in early May. 4 machines: an MF7718 for spraying, an MF8s and 27 for primary work, an MF87 and 37 for the heaviest pulls, and an MF7716 as the utility tractor. All new, all red and silver. All financed at 2.9% over 5 years. The Deers sold fast. Travis moved them private sale through an online auction platform. He got $446,000 total, slightly better than he'd expected. The Massey Fergusons arrived on a Tuesday in mid-May, delivered on 2 transports. Carl watched them unload from the door of the shop. He didn't say a word. The next morning, he cleaned out his toolbox, shook Travis's hand, and left. No anger, no argument, just done. Travis tried one more time. "Carl, I'm serious about the training. Massey will send someone here. You don't have to figure this out alone." Carl shook his head. "I appreciate it, but I'm not interested." And that was it. 18 years of working for the Holmgren family, gone in a handshake. Travis stood in the shop that afternoon, alone, looking at 4 brand-new Massey Ferguson tractors he now had to maintain himself. He'd saved $218,000 on the purchase. He was about to find out what that actually cost. The first week wasn't bad. The tractors ran flawlessly. The 8737 handled the ripper better than the old 8320R. The 7718 had cleaner hydraulics for the sprayer. Everything Ron promised about performance was true. But on day 6, the DEF system on the 8727 threw a code. Travis called the Castleton dealership. Ron said he'd send a tech out the next morning. The tech showed up at 9 a.m., diagnosed a faulty sensor, replaced it in 20 minutes, and left. Problem solved. But it cost $340 for the service call. When Carl was around, a sensor swap was a 10-minute job. Free. Travis didn't think much of it. It was one call. 2 weeks later, the 7716 needed an oil change. Normally, Carl would have done it in the shop. Now Travis had to either do it himself or pay the dealership $180 in labor. He did it himself. Then the air filter housing on the 8737 cracked during a field pass. Not a major issue, just a $90 part and 30 minutes of work. But Travis didn't have the part. He called Castleton. They had it in stock. He drove 40 miles to pick it up, installed it himself, and lost half a day. If Carl had been there, it would have been fixed by lunch. By mid-June, Travis was doing all his own maintenance, oil changes, filter swaps, grease intervals. He wasn't incompetent. He'd grown up on a farm. He knew how to turn a wrench. But he wasn't a mechanic. And he didn't have 30 years of muscle memory telling him what a failing fuel pump sounded like. He started staying up until midnight in the shop, reading service manuals, watching YouTube videos, learning the Massey Ferguson ACO diagnostic system. It worked, but it was slow. And every hour he spent in the shop was an hour he wasn't spending in the field. The real problem started in July. Travis needed help. He put out an ad, experienced farm mechanic wanted, Massey Ferguson experience preferred but not required, competitive pay. He posted it on local job boards. He mentioned it at the co-op. He called a technical school in Fargo and asked if any recent grads were looking for work. Nothing. One guy called. He had Case IH experience. Travis explained the fleet was all Massey Ferguson. The guy said, "I don't know Massey. Good luck." Another guy called. He was 61, semi-retired, just looking for part-time work. Travis explained the job. The guy asked, "You got any deer?" "No. All Massey." "Yeah, I'll pass. I don't know those machines." Travis tried expanding the search. He called a diesel mechanic in Fargo who did freelance ag work. The mechanic laughed. "You're the guy who went full Massey Ferguson, right? I heard about that. Everyone's running Deere or Case around here. I'm not learning a whole new platform for one client." Travis hung up. He tried 3 more mechanics over the next 2 weeks. None of them wanted to work on Massey Ferguson. Not because the machines were bad, not because they were complicated. Because in a region where 90% of the iron was green or red Case, nobody wanted to be the guy who only knew Massey. It wasn't a skills problem. It was a market problem, and Travis was on the wrong side of it. He ran the entire 2017 season doing his own maintenance. Every oil change, every filter, every calibration, every diagnostic code. The Massey Fergusons performed beautifully. The 8737 pulled harder than the old 8320R. The 7718 sprayer controls were cleaner than anything Travis had run before. Fuel economy was 8% better across the fleet. On paper, the switch was a success. But Travis was exhausted. He was working 90-hour weeks, 16-hour days in the field, then 3 hours in the shop, then collapsing into bed at 1 a.m. and waking up at 5. His wife Jenna noticed. "You need to hire someone." "I tried. Nobody wants to work on Massey." "Then call Carl." Travis shook his head. Carl made his choice. So did you. She wasn't wrong. Travis had chosen the Massey Fergusons. Carl had chosen to leave. Both decisions were rational. Both had consequences. But sitting at the kitchen table at midnight, covered in grease, reading a service manual for a hydraulic pump he didn't fully understand, Travis wondered if the $218,000 savings was worth it. The machines were better, but the support system he'd relied on for 18 years was gone, and he couldn't buy that back. Fall came. Harvest was clean. The Massey Fergusons handled it. Travis kept up with maintenance, kept the machines running, kept his head down. But the town noticed. At the co-op, conversations got quieter when he walked in. Not hostile, just distant. Travis had always been the guy who ran a tight operation, paid his bills, didn't cause trouble. Now he was the guy who ditched John Deere and lost his mechanic over it. One afternoon in October, Travis ran into a neighbor named Keith Arneson at the fuel station. Keith ran 1,800 acres of wheat and corn, all John Deere. He'd known Travis since high school. "Heard Carl's working for the Deere dealer now," Keith said. Travis hadn't heard that. "Good for him," Travis said. Keith nodded. "Yeah, they hired him last month. Service department. He's doing pre-delivery inspections, some field repairs. Seems happy." Travis felt something tighten in his chest. He didn't know if it was anger or regret. "That's good," Travis said again. Keith leaned against his truck. "You still running those Massey Fergusons?" "Yeah." "How's that going?" "Fine. Machines are solid." Keith smiled. Not mean, just knowing. "But you're doing your own wrenching now, right?" Travis didn't answer. Keith shook his head. "Man, I don't know if I could do that. Carl kept my dad's equipment running for 10 years before I took over. I can change oil, but anything more than that, I'm calling the dealer. You're tougher than me." It wasn't a compliment. It was pity. Travis finished fueling and left. Winter hit hard. In January 2018, the 8727 wouldn't start. Temperature was minus 18 degrees Fahrenheit. Travis spent 4 hours in the shop trying to diagnose it. Finally called Castleton. They sent a tech out the next day. Glow plug relay, a $60 part, 20 minutes of work, $385 service call. If Carl had been there, it would have been fixed before breakfast. Travis started keeping a log of every service call, every parts run, every hour he spent in the shop doing work Carl used to do. By March 2018, he'd spent $4,100 on service calls. He'd driven to Castleton 11 times to pick up parts. He'd spent an estimated 190 hours doing his own maintenance, time he could have spent on agronomy, marketing, or just sleeping. The Massey Fergusons were still outperforming his old dears. Fuel economy was better. Breakdowns were minimal. The machines themselves were not the problem, but the infrastructure around them was costing him, and it wasn't getting better. Then, in April 2018, something shifted. Travis got a call from a younger guy named Miguel Herrera. Miguel was 28. He'd grown up in southern Texas, moved to North Dakota for work in the oil fields, and recently enrolled in a diesel tech program at a community college in Fargo. He was looking for hands-on experience. He didn't care what color the tractors were. "I saw your ad from last year," Miguel said. "You still looking for someone?" Travis had taken the ad down months ago, but he said yes. They met at the farm on a Saturday. Travis walked Miguel through the fleet, explained the systems, showed him the service manuals. Miguel asked good questions. He didn't have Massey Ferguson experience, but he had a sharp mechanical mind, and more importantly, he didn't have 30 years of John Deere loyalty hardwired into his brain. "I can learn this," Miguel said. Travis hired him on the spot, part-time to start, $22 an hour. Flexible schedule around Miguel's classes. It wasn't Carl, but it was something. Miguel started in May 2018. The first month was slow. He was learning the Massey systems, getting familiar with the ATCO diagnostic tools, building confidence. But by June, he was handling routine maintenance solo, oil changes, filter swaps, fluid checks. By July, he was diagnosing codes. By August, he was doing field repairs. Travis couldn't believe it. A 28-year-old kid with no Massey Ferguson experience had become competent on the equipment in 4 months because he didn't have any loyalty preventing him from learning. Miguel didn't care that it wasn't John Deere. He just cared that it was a machine he could understand. And that made all the difference. The 2018 season ran smoother. Travis wasn't doing midnight maintenance sessions anymore. Miguel handled most of it. Service calls dropped to almost nothing. Parts runs became Miguel's job. Travis got his time back, and the Massey Fergusons kept proving themselves. By fall 2018, Travis ran the numbers again. Fuel savings compared to his old Deeres, $11,400 over 18 months. Reduced service costs now that Miguel was handling maintenance, $6,800 savings compared to dealership labor rates. Total savings from the fleet purchase, still $218,000. The math still worked, but the first year had been brutal, and Travis knew that if Miguel hadn't called, he'd probably still be doing his own wrenching, or worse, he'd have sold the Massey Fergusons at a loss and gone back to green. By 2020, the Massey Ferguson fleet was just normal. Miguel was full-time now. He'd graduated from the tech program and turned down 2 dealership offers to keep working for Travis. The pay was better, the hours were flexible, and he'd become the go-to Massey Ferguson guy in the region. 3 other farmers in the area had bought Massey equipment in the past 2 years. 2 of them hired Miguel for overflow work. The Castleton dealership started referring people to him. Travis's operation was running as efficiently as it ever had. The Massey Fergusons had logged 6,000 plus hours with minimal issues. The fuel economy advantage was real. The performance was undeniable. And the $218,000 savings had compounded, lower operating costs, better efficiency, reduced downtime. But the cost had been real too. Travis had lost Carl, a man who'd worked for his family for 18 years. He'd spent a year doing 90-hour weeks. He'd spent $4,100 on service calls that wouldn't have existed if Carl had stayed. He'd been quietly pitied at the co-op, and he'd gambled that he could find someone willing to learn Massey Ferguson in a region that didn't care about it. He got lucky. Miguel showed up, but if Miguel hadn't called, the whole thing could have collapsed. In the summer of 2021, Travis ran into Carl at a farm equipment auction in Fargo. They hadn't spoken in 4 years. Carl was there representing the John Deere dealership, bidding on trade-ins for resale. Travis was there looking at a used grain cart. They made eye contact across the auction yard. Carl walked over. Travis. Carl. Silence. Then Carl asked, "How are those Massey Fergusons treating you?" Travis could have said a lot of things. He could have been defensive. He could have justified the decision. He could have explained the savings. Instead, he just told the truth. "They're good machines. I hired a guy who knows them. It works." Carl nodded. "Good. I'm glad." Another pause. Then Travis asked, "You like the dealership?" Carl shrugged. "It's steady. Benefits are good. I'm not in the field as much, but that's fine at my age." They stood there for a moment. Two men who'd worked together for 18 years, now on opposite sides of a choice that hadn't needed to be personal, but was. Finally, Carl said, "I didn't leave because I was mad at you." "I know. I just didn't want to start over." "I know." Carl looked at the ground. "But I probably could have, if I'd wanted to." Travis didn't say anything. Carl looked back up. "I think I was just tired, and it was easier to blame the color of the tractors than admit that." Travis nodded. They shook hands, and that was it. Travis still runs those 4 Massey Fergusons. As of 2024, they've logged over 11,000 hours combined. 2 of them are still on the original engines. Fuel economy is still 7 to 9% better than comparable John Deere models. Resale value has held steady. Miguel is still his mechanic. He's 34 now. He bought a house in Castleton. He's engaged. He's thinking about starting his own mobile repair business someday. The Massey Fergusons saved Travis $218,000 on the purchase. They saved him another $40,000 plus in operating costs over 7 years. The math was right. But the first year, the year Carl left, the year Travis worked 90-hour weeks, the year he had to prove he could survive without the infrastructure everyone else relied on, that year cost him something the spreadsheet didn't account for. It cost him certainty. It cost him the comfort of doing what everyone else did. And it cost him a relationship with a man who'd kept his family's equipment running for nearly 2 decades. Carl could have learned Massey Ferguson. Travis could have stayed with John Deere. Both men made a choice, and both choices were right, and both were costly. That's the thing about changing colors in a town that runs on loyalty. The machines don't care, but the people do. And sometimes, the best decision on paper is still the hardest one to live with. Travis would make the same choice again, but he understands why Carl wouldn't.